Welcome to Grablives, everybody. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, John Vargas, and just to start off with our disclaimer, everything we say and do on this podcast does not reflect the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. And without further ado, just to give a recap, man, I took a little break from recording episodes. I just got back from Japan, and I had proposed to my girlfriend, Haley. Now we are engaged and moving forward with a lot of life stuff. But now getting back to it, there's a lot of guests I have lined up coming up here. So please stay tuned for that. And ending the year of 2024, man, this year was crazy, but good stuff. Lots of transformation for myself personally and for the podcast, and for I think everyone can say they feel the same thing. But now we're moving forward. So for today's guest, a friend of mine had introduced me to Amy Charlesworth. She's a host of the podcast called QNAMY, QNAMY. She's a retired Army vet, and her biggest thing is that she's really fixated on her own personal healing process with plant medicine. Seems to be a common theme these days, but because it works. And I think the paradigm shifting from that has really been profound, because we're realizing that some of these medicines, man, they're really taking PTSD issues to the next level, to where men and women are going, to having these retreats and stuff and having completely profound 360 effects from the medicines. And so she is here to talk about her story, her movement, and the education that's involved with some of these medicines. And, for myself, I'm just not going to endorse anything, but I'm just here to listen to people and their stories, and just to express what truth is been lying underneath and dormant with some of these things. And I'm very happy to host this platform to enable people to hear every perspective, right, on what we're dealing with as a collective throughout the nation with first responders and veterans. I think we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. So it was a great episode, and please stay tuned and listen, and we'll go from there. Love you guys.
It's time for Grablives.
All right. So we were talking, you had a tattoo by a Tibetan Buddhist monk, correct?
I did. Yeah. Lama Tashi. He's amazing. Yeah. He
That's
chooses it for you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how does that go if you're getting a tattoo by a Buddhist monk? I didn't even know monks tattooed.
He's a pretty cool one. He's not a regular Tibetan monk. He's a cool Tibetan monk. But he's amazing. So he's an artist. A lot of Tibetan monks will choose some sort of quote unquote profession, whether it's like art or history or writing, et cetera. Like, they try to preserve the traditions of the Tibetan experience, culture. And so he chose art, and he's an artist, and his art turned into tattooing. And so he does these really beautiful ceremonies where he'll ask you your birthday, the time you were born, where you were born, and based on the astrology around that, the Tibetan astrology, he will choose a deity that represents your life's purpose. And mine was Vajrapani, and he'll give you a tattoo that is the mantra that you should say for 2 years, 108 times a day.
What's the mantra?
Mine is Benzapani Hum, and it's basically designed to help you clear the mind of any negative self-thoughts, negative talk, negative energy. And Vajrapani is known as the hand of the Buddha. He's the lightning wielder, the lightning rod. He's the only warrior Tibetan deity that there is in the Buddhist religion. And so he's depicted as this blue, really angry, violent, like kind of scary looking character when he's in his defender, warrior, spiritual warrior mode. And then there's other depictions of him that exist where he's very wise and peaceful and calm, and just this intelligent being that is very, again, wise, that helps you basically clear away the attachments to life and be present in the moment.
Hell yeah. That's rad. I've kind of ingrained myself into Tibetan Buddhist practices for quite some time now. I mean, my daily practice is chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. And when I was first introduced into chanting, I thought it was weird and bizarre, and it's because I didn't understand it. If most of my ignorance and things I don't understand, it's when I start judging things, right? And then when I actually started to do the practice, it was really interesting because I would start chanting and I would, go into it would like open up all the channels and clear. And while I would chant, I can just see like a bleeding of my thoughts. Like thoughts would just dissipate, and it would just be like this rewind of my mind. And then I would stop chanting, and then I'd be at peace, and then I would continue with my meditation. So when I started actually ingraining it in my practice, it became this part of like this anchor for one of my practices. It was really, really rad. But that's really cool that you had that tattoo.
The chanting thing, I would have been the same. Like,
Yeah.
gosh, 6 months ago, if you'd have been like, Amy, I want you to chant this chant every single morning, 108 times a day, I would have been like, are you crazy? Like, what are you talking about? But the more that I've been tapping into like frequency and vibration and meditation, and also just trying to help myself heal. That's the whole purpose I went even down this path, is to clear my own negative self-thoughts and my own thinking. I see memes everywhere. Like you'll see a frog sitting in the middle of a pond, and as it's like, doing the frog chirp, you'll see the waves.
Oh, I've seen that.
Yeah, the
That's
waves
sick.
around the water where like as you're doing this. So
Yeah.
now apply that to your practice
Right.
of chanting. So venza pani hum. Like as I'm doing that, right? Like I can feel my tummy and my body vibrate slightly as I'm resonating on those sounds. And it's literally clearing my mind during the meditative practice if I'm solely focused on just that. Like that's the only thing I can focus on. I'm feeling how it's making me feel. I'm vibrating that positive energy. I'm focused specifically on just the here and now. Like I'm present fully. It's so healing. So I take that time every morning, 108 times a day. And it's really, really changed my mood.
Yeah, for sure. So just to rewind a little bit as well, this is Amy. What's your last name again?
Charlesworth, but you have to put your
Forgot
pinky
it
out when you
again.
say it. It's okay.
Charlesworth.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a professor from Cambridge.
It
like,
should.
you know what I
It's
mean?
British. It absolutely should.
Yes. So this is Amy. I had a friend who's been on the podcast already, and she had introduced us because Amy's a veteran and she has had this vision for really helping and reaching out to first responders and primarily veterans, I believe, right? And more so in the spectrum of how to treat PTSD, right, with plant medicine. So, the plant medicine, there's a lot of miseducation, I believe, and also the lack of awareness behind what it offers. And so I'd love to talk about, just kind of going backwards, how you have done your service and what that brought you to as you finished your time. And then after that, how you kind of had to figure out yourself in a way, then how you came across plant medicine and so forth. If you want to start there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy to. So, I've known I've had mental health issues for over 10, 15 years. I was in Afghanistan, 2010, 2012. And, while I was in Afghanistan, even then I had just such deep depression and anxiety, and I just hated my life so much. And while I was there, specifically why I'm bringing up Afghanistan is because one of the first times I got put on like a heavy dose of SSRI medications, I was in Afghanistan and I was struggling. My chain of command were like, you need to go see.
What was the medication?
At the time, it was probably, starts with a Z, not Zoloft, but something similar. I've tried
it
a
doesn't
few.
matter.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's just an SSRI. Anyway, so I was in country in Afghanistan, and I was working in an office environment at the time. And I had been told, go to the med command, get some medications and see what they can do for you. So I did. I went, and they, without even so much as like a detailed conversation, they were throwing me a bottle of SSRIs. And so I started taking them. Well, they completely misdiagnosed me. The medication was completely the wrong strength. The instructions to taper on it were completely wrong. And within a week, I was sitting at my duty station at the desk. My one of the chiefs in the office turned around and looked at me, and she's like, "You're drooling, right?" And I touched my face, and sure enough, I was drooling, and I was just like spaced, like just completely out of it. And that was the first time I realized like just how bad things had gotten, like where I'm like now on these medications. And that was the story of my life for the next 10, 12 years. You know, I was on every single medication you can think of, trying to figure out what worked for me, what didn't work for me, in and out of a therapist's office, going to the VA. I just struggled with so many issues. And something that I learned, you know, like a lot of military veterans will, I wouldn't say blame, but they look at the military service as maybe the cause of their mental health issues. But what we find so often to be the truth is that a lot of people go into service fields like being a first responder, a police officer, going to the military, whatever it is, because that trauma or their pain or their issues started actually in childhood. And so they'll go, and this isn't for everyone. So for those of you who are like, no, I had great parents, amazing. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about, you know, the majority of folks that resonate with this. You know, they look to the service or the military as an escape or to be the hero, right? There's a lot of research done around that. And so I realized actually that, oh my gosh, like, yeah, that's correct. Like I had all of these issues. I went to the military because I was struggling in my childhood. So I just had so much unresolved trauma issues, drama that I needed to solve. So my mental health issues weren't necessarily just the military's doing. These are things I picked up in childhood too. And so in 2022, I left the service for a couple of reasons. One, because the pullout of Afghanistan was terrible. I felt like I was wasting my life. But also because I realized like I was not doing good mentally at all. And it got to the point where I was like ready to end my life. Like I just did not want to be around anymore. And so, you know, having already tried all of the medications over those 10, 12 years, having already tried all of the therapies and the VA and all of that, I got hopeless. I was in a place of just absolute desperation. Like there's this, I literally remember crying one day in my car, shouting out, talking to nobody, anybody who would listen, but in the universe, you know, at the same time, like, why? Like, why is my life like this? Why does everything have to suck so bad? Why am I, you know, just like in this victim mentality where I was like, why is everything trash all the time? And I feel like shit. And I mean, I could cry right now, just like remembering how I used to feel. And I just called out, like, I can't do this anymore. And that was what, like, really when I had made up my mind, like, I was just, you know, I'm going to just end my life. Like, I can't do this anymore. And almost like a just divine chain of events, after I asked for help from the universe, calling out into the ether, whoever can hear me, things started to change. And this slow drip turned on of a faucet of knowing, education, affirmations that were positive, just like this slow thread pulling me towards plant medicine. First, it started with me listening to Esther Hicks and positive affirmations on YouTube, and then, you know, other people like Joe Dispenza, and just, first of all, just getting my mind right. But then I started to hear from the weirdest places about like ayahuasca, and I felt immediately drawn to that. Like, what is that? What is it? What does it do? Like, I just really was curious, but it was like a deep knowing that I needed to learn more. And then fast forward to this year, you know, it was almost 2 years in the making, this story. I was speaking at an event in Dallas, Texas, and I was talking about mental health. I already had a podcast talking about military transition to help soldiers transition from military to civilian life. And I was speaking at an event because of that podcast, sharing about mental health and how important it is to take care of yourself during that transition period, because a lot of people end up ending their lives during that period, and how there is hope, surround yourself with community, all of this stuff. Well, during this speech, I had a person come up to me from the audience and said, did you just say in front of everybody that you wanted to end your life? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just being honest with you. That's the struggle that I went through. And he's like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm not going to let you even talk about that, you know? And he's like, I need you to meet this man in Austin, Texas, who has a nonprofit for military veterans and first responders. His name's Justin, and it's called the Illuminating Co. And it's a place that you can go, and they serve plant medicine, and they have an intensive program to help you with your mental health, and you need to go. And so I was like, okay, well, interesting. Thanks for letting me know. So we part ways. Random series of events. The place I had done the speech at was at the headquarters of a private jet company. And Tia, who's the founder of Stella Jets, she said to me, do you want to come to have dinner with us in Austin, Texas? And I was like, well, yeah, but how am I going to get there? And she's like, no, we're going to take a jet and we're going to come back tonight. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, that please. So we all get on this jet, and the member that was in the audience was on the jet with us too. And he was like, you're never going to believe this. I had no idea we were going to Austin, but since we're going to Austin, do you want to meet Justin? And so I'm like, okay. So lo and behold, Justin shows up at the restaurant that we went to for dinner. We have an introduction. And within a month from then, I was back in Austin, Texas on a scholarship at his plant medicine program. And I had my first sitting with psilocybin, MDMA, and bufo DMT over a course of a week. And it saved my life.
Yeah.
Saved my life. Yeah. So everything since then has been just this beautiful, beautiful course correction. And I'm so proud to say I'm anxiety free. I'm depression free. I don't want to die. Like, I am thriving now, thanks to that week.
What's the name of his nonprofit?
It's called the Illuminating Collective, and
cool.
they have a couple subgroups.
I think I follow them on Instagram.
You might, yeah. There's a group called Illuminating Heroes, and then they have got Illuminating Souls, which is for civilians that are not first responders or military veterans. So anybody can go. It's an entheogenic church.
Cool.
But yeah, they have these beautiful, it's like 25-week programs that you go through. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I like to take it back a little bit. First, to the fact that veterans have it so hard, and I think the reason for that is the programming involved to being a good soldier. And so what happens is when you're having this programming, right, you lose sight on your own self-care and your own self-identity, really. So I believe, because I live in like that type of world, right? Your loss of self-identity crisis really smacks really hard. And when that happens, it feels like everything's crumbling. And that's why I feel like there's so much of that kind of just pushing through the barriers of like this mental health crisis. I mean, it's a pandemic, in my opinion, an epidemic, a pandemic, however you want to state it or label it as, because we serve, right, others. And however, for some reason, we forget to serve ourselves. And in that aspect, we lose sight on the sense of self and the power of the self. And because we're trying to give our character and a piece of ourselves to the hierarchy, right, the pecking order, and that can really be detrimental to one person. And I think I used to be a good soldier in a sense where I wanted to make sure my superiors respected me. You know what I mean? And I wanted to make sure I was doing a good job and I was being a good boy. You know what I mean? But sometimes I would just lose sight on who I was. You know what I mean? And I got caught up in it. And it was an illusion for myself. And I think that's how the military is kind of set up, right? And my world is a paramilitary cycle of how we operate, because there has to be order in order for us to commit this task, right? And get the job done during a very chaotic incident or an environment and so forth. However, we lose this capacity to build the community to support one another. And that's most important within what we're doing, right? And I think that kind of has been one of the things I've seen after starting being involved with behavioral health with firefighters and having different veterans come on, and everyone's got the same common theme, right? So that's kind of like what I've seen so far in regards to, why is this happening to us, right? And in regards to what you went through with SSRIs, I've heard many stories of the same thing, especially for veterans and first responders taking SSRIs, because we're kind of like designed and built different, right? Like we're used to having this administrative gift of being able to organize our thoughts and behaviors, and just because we're very gifted at that, right? And as soon as you put SSRIs in us, it just blocks all that, and you become fogged up, and you don't feel like you're sharp. And so I think that SSRIs, they do help, they do serve a purpose, and however, they do harm, and no one ever really talks about the harmful side effects that are involved with SSRIs. And when we say side effects, they're not just side effects, they're direct effects. Which people don't ever say. Like all the doctors say, oh yeah, it's just a side effect. You have, restless leg syndrome and insomnia and all this other shit, right? but they're direct effects, right? Let's just be honest, brutally honest with that. And I think it's really profound how you kind of, all this kind of happened and fell in your lap. I was kind of talking to you how everything fell in my lap because it was meant to be, right? And kind of going back into the medicines you did, right? Sometimes I have to educate people on, because people just turn on this episode and be like, what the hell is Bufo? What the hell is MDMA and psilocybin? We've had a couple guests come on who served psilocybin and MDMA, and they explain all that shit, but I can explain it now. Like, there seems to be a huge paradigm shift in which MDMA has been really helpful for first responders and veterans. I've seen a lot of push with MDMA, and they were trying to push to legalize it last year, I think, and they or a few months ago, I believe, and then they canned it, right?
Well, actually, I don't know if you saw the news yesterday. As of yesterday, the VA just announced that they're going to fund, I think it's a 5-year study. It's like a $1.5 million 5-year study. There's, I think, 2 or 3 centers in the United States, VA centers, that they're going to fund an MDMA study. So they're actually working towards legalization. There's major efforts to do that across all fronts for even psilocybin and things like that. But the official announcement was made yesterday. Rad. Yeah, MDMA study.
Yeah, I mean, I have heard amazing results with MDMA and paired with psilocybin, which is really interesting. And MDMA, the first time I kind of was introduced with that was a book called A Dose of Hope by Dr. Dan Engel. And the way I ran into him was I read his book, The Concussion Repair Manual. And that's when I went through my whole concussion stuff, my traumatic brain injury. And I read that book, and then I saw he wrote another book, and it was called A Dose of Hope. And so he's a huge advocate for introducing MDMA to treat PTSD. And I heard him talk one time about this woman who is severely sexually abused, and nothing was helping her. And he gave her some MDMA, and there was like a team of therapists watching her work through her trauma, severe trauma. And she was able to work through it with a ton of gratitude and an open heart. And it really transformed her life and her experience. So amazing results with MDMA. And the other one was Bufo. I think Bufo was pretty interesting because of its rapid effect it has on people, because it's not a very long session. It's about 10 to 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, depending on the person, right? And I know there's a lot, if you ever want to like research or hear about someone's experiences, I think the biggest person to kind of hear from is Mike Tyson, because he, looking at his life, right? He went to prison for sexually assaulting a woman, and like he was just like this madman animal, right? And you hear him now, he's a way different person. He'll talk about his Bufo experiences, how it changed his life. And I think it's a really good example. And obviously he's a famous person and so forth. But yeah, Bufo is 5-MeO-DMT, right? So is different from other DMT medicines. And the fact that it's just a different molecule paired up with how it's operating. And DMT is just like this molecule or this secretion that comes from our brains during birth, death, and during a deep REM cycle when we're dreaming. And so we secrete this naturally, right? And so this frog, this toad, has developed this secretion, right? And you're able to smoke it, right? And then you go off in this experience, and it's apparently you meet God, right? They call it the God molecule, and you come into this revelation with what that is for you, that interpretation is for you. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And if anybody's listening that is curious to dive more on what Bufo is, Dr. Martin Ball, he's very well published on this. He's written over 20 books on specifically DMT, 5-MeO-DMT, the God molecule, as it's also known as. But I'll also just add what Bufo does is it shuts off your brain for a moment, where I have a video that I'd be happy to share with you, so you can see what happened with me. But as soon as I smoked it, my brain kind of shut off for a moment, and my body released. And anybody who's taking it, you have no clue what you're going to do. There's no way you can control what you're going to do. Some people, I'm not kidding, masturbate. Some people strip naked. Some people have these violent outbursts. Some people scream. Some people cry. Some people laugh, right? You have no idea what you're going to do. And the reason for that is, have you ever heard of a book called The Body Keeps the Score?
Yeah.
So trauma And the reasons why SSRIs for most people don't necessarily cure issues or solve issues, which is why you have to stay on them for a long, long time. They just mask things. And so you're not actually getting to the root issue of why you have these need for SSRIs in the first place. Well, Bufo gets straight to the issues, goes right there. And what happens is when you have traumas or any kind of stored up, pent up energy, it stores in your body. So what Bufo does is it creates a portal for your body to release that energy. So if you look at my video, I have 2 Bufo sessions back to back. And so about the period of what was almost an hour in the 2 sessions back to back, I am screaming the entire time, screaming, hollering, lashing out. And I didn't know I was doing this, but this was all the energy that my body had stored up. Now, let me translate that for you. Since I was a kid, I was always scared, always. I was always in fight or flight mode, always in survival mode, never sure what was going to happen, who was going to take care of me, if I was going to be okay or not. And then I joined the military at 17. And then I was, again, always scared, always fearful. I've got sergeants yelling at me, being flown all over the world, going into war zones. Again, fight or flight mode, always in survival. And so I had all this rage and anger. It was one of my symptoms that I was struggling with, is I was angry all the time. I couldn't even drive around Los Angeles traffic without literally throwing my car in park, getting out and being ready to fight somebody. And that's not healthy or good, right? And so when I went through Bufo, that Bufo basically shut my brain off, allowed my body to get out all that pent up energy and scream and yell and cry and get it out. And I've never felt better. It's just gone. The anxiety is gone. The depression is gone. And it's because I had never been able to give my body an avenue to release all of that energy. So that's why people end up with diseases, PTSD, issues sleeping, anger, depression. It's because your body is hanging on to some stuff that you have not resolved. And so Bufo is a beautiful medicine to help create that gateway to heal it.
I'm glad you brought that up. The Body Keeps the Score has been a huge book for me going to different conferences in regards to dedicated to helping first responders with the mental health crisis we're dealing with. And that book was brought up my first conference I ever went to. And, they all brought it up. Hey, your body is keeping this trauma. And then that was it. They didn't really talk about, okay, well, what do we do now for that? Right? They had no solution for that. They had talked about some things like EMDR, talk therapy, but no one talked about somatic release of the body. No one talked about unlocking that zip file of what's lying dormant within, right? And I was kind of skewed off that idea that, everyone's read this book and pretty amazing study, right? But there was no solution. There's no adaptation to what that book was offering. So I think now there's a pretty profound shift with things that are actually accessing that zip file and are able to navigate, okay, how do we get rid of the trauma that's locked in the body, right? And so I've been, since June, like 5-6 months now, I've ingrained myself with the practice of Human Garage, which is somatic release of the body. And so now that I've done the training and gone to all their conferences, I am now offering different, I guess, events with Human Garage to help people basically transform trauma from the body. And it's really amazing. And it's transformed my body because what happened with me is I did so much inner work, but my body kept holding on to stuff, right? And as I started working with this practice, it was transformative because my mind became clearer and I would have to work through some stuff because my body was unlocking these things at the same time and have to realize the emotion that was trapped within. Pretty amazing practice, but these are things that are going to be really helpful, right? To navigate with that book, that concept of, wow, the body's keeping this trapped. But pretty amazing. I have heard of those experiences with Bufo, how you just you don't know what's going to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I had a really good friend who was on this podcast. His name's Sean Forrester, and he's a master Campbell practitioner, and he's a therapist at a first responder clinic. And he ended up doing Bufo, and he was telling me about his experience. And he was saying that he went to his birth and ended up so he had always had back pain and realized his back was from that part of his birthing cycle, and went straight to that and experienced his birth. And pretty amazing experience. He was telling me, dude, it was so profound, And then I've heard other people where they're just like gnashing at the teeth and like feeling like they're strangled, and they had to go through that birthing experience when their cord is wrapped around their neck. And their entire life, they've kept that feeling of being strangled since birth. And Bufo took them to that moment.
Yeah. Bufo is
It's
such a
crazy.
beautiful medicine because it will, I say this to anybody who talks to me about plant medicine now. I mean, this is the number one topic I talk about on my show too. But for anybody who's interested in plant medicine or has never tried it, et cetera, what I always tell everyone is it will scan your body, no matter what it is that you're going to be taking, whether that's MDA or Bufo or psilocybin. You're going to be scanned. And when you're scanned, the medicine's assessing where do you need the release? Like what trauma are you needing to process? And it might not be what you think. It might be something deeper, something you've forgotten, something that's been buried down very deep and years old, but it will give you exactly what you need. And so just be ready for it. And I always advocate too, like these aren't medicines that you should ever do alone or by yourself. You should be with trained practitioners and, in safe environments, because set and setting is so important to that healing space, because you truly don't know how you're going to react. Just a really quick example. When I did Bufo the second round, I actually hit my head on the deck. We were outside. I had 4 facilitators around me, and I still was able to hit my head on the floor. So, I didn't know I was doing that. When I came out of it, the medicine, I realized I had like this little mark on my head, and I'm like, what happened? And I saw the video, and sure enough, I cracked my head on the deck. So it's really important that you're with safe place, safe people, and people that know what they're doing.
That's crazy. So, a big part of this is integration, right? And just to understand what the word integration means, a gentleman had kind of displaced this idea of what integration is versus balance. And I cannot forget when he had this presentation and he kind of showed the difference between the two, right? Integration is like a jigsaw puzzle in a way. And for the most part, you got most of the pieces when you're putting a puzzle together. And you may have some missing portions of that piece, the whole mural of what you're putting together, right? And through integration, you're putting pieces into place. And for the most part, you have everything kind of connected, And so it's not as off tilt or hard to manage. But with balance, it's really hard to manage, right? And so people want to kind of, the way he was kind of describing it was like, I like integration better because integration, you have most of the structure in place, and balance is really difficult. When you take one pebble off the scale, it all goes off tilt. So I love that expression of how he kind of displayed it and showed it to everyone, how integration is so important. And integration for your plant medicine experiences are so vital, because 3 weeks, 3 months, 6 months from that experience, things can come up where you have another piece of the puzzle you're putting in that you have a remembrance with or an emotion. And then you're able to kind of put together most of the picture that you kind of had missing pieces with, right? So integration is helpful when you have people helping you kind of guide you to discover your own realization with what needs to be realized, right? No one can access that for you. And I think there has to be really skilled people to kind of get you in that position to kind of find that yourself. You know what I mean?
That's where the power of like community comes in too. But in terms of integration, what I'll tell you is I would strongly just champion everything you just said about integration. Me going to the plant medicine ceremony was simply a doorway that was opened to me to do the healing work that needed to be done. And it helped to kind of like pour out my overfilled cup just a little bit so I could start to deal with life. But the true work has been since coming home from that. And integration for me, it's not like you can just take plant medicine, boom, my anxiety's gone. No. I had to do a full 360-degree audit of my life. And as I did that audit, it's like, what am I consuming? So I was drinking caffeine to a crazy amount every single day. What does caffeine do? It exacerbates anxiety, right? Increases your heart rate, gives you a higher blood pressure, right? It does all these things in your brain. If you start talking about brain health, you're going to want to cut your caffeine today. Those are things that are not healthy for you. So I had to quit drinking alcohol, because alcohol is a depressant. It makes you depressed, and it locks you in this cycle of feeling terrible about yourself. It doesn't do your body well. It doesn't make you feel good. It makes you sick. It makes you overweight, right? There's all these things that are negatively impacting you, right? So I cut caffeine, I cut I cut alcohol. And then I looked at my friend group, right? Who am I around? Majority of the people I was around were negative, gossiping, talking trash about their spouses. They were partying all the time, doing drugs and alcohol, party lifestyle in Los Angeles. Just not a great, healthy group to be around, right? And then I looked at my finances. I was blowing money on shopping. And so then I was, barely making ends meet because I was blowing all my money on doing stuff I shouldn't have been spending it on. So you can probably get the hint now, right? Like I'm looking at my entire life and it's not where I want to be. Like if I was to sit down and make a vision board about where I want to be, how I want to feel, how I want to operate during the day, who I want to be around, what I want to do with my career, none of those things were in my life in that moment, right? So going through this process, it gave me the pathway and the tools to evaluate everything. So I put myself in a cocoon and I cut off all of the things that I shouldn't have been consuming, including what TV shows am I watching? Am I watching horror shows? What's exasperating the fight or flight mode inside me, right? What's making me feel like I have to be in survival mode? And I cut off all of those things, which meant for a period of 3 months, I've been in a cocoon where I did isolate a bit, which I also had, of course, mentors, this beautiful group with Illuminating Co. We do weekly calls. So I did have support, but doing that process allowed me to evaluate everything, cut off the things I knew weren't serving me, and then start building the things I wanted actually in my life. So that vision board I'm talking about, I started introducing new people into my life that were really healthy, yoga practice, breath work practice, replacements for coffee. So things like drinking adaptogens or more water, like getting up earlier, going for walks in the early morning sun, getting my sleep habits on track, right? So doing all of the things that are supportive to your brain health and supportive to your mental health and your well-being. So doing that work holistically, that integration practice has been this beautiful nest, this cocoon to help me become the best version of myself. And that's what I'm finding. I've never been happier because I'm now putting my own mask on first and really doing the deep work, processing the issues that, had plagued me for my whole life and cutting off the things that were exasperating them.
I love that. That's, one of the things with that is action, right? You made the changes to inhabit like a better lifestyle, right? With these small things that wasn't serving you anymore, right? I think it's a very common thing when someone does have a plant medicine experience, they come home and they're like, dude, what am I doing with my life? You start to just see more. You're awakened to what is just toxic, right? And you start to extract whatever just doesn't resonate anymore. And that goes with people, even when you distance yourself with family members and you start to see, man, what was I doing to myself? And you start to see things a bit clearer. That's what's really beautiful about people having these plant medicine experiences because of that reason. You start to have this personal ownership now with who you are. And I think that's what plant medicine offers is like this ability to kind of unlock what was already there in the first place, right? And now you can see it clearly. And then you get to kind of like make a decision. And that's the thing too, is it works really well with addiction because you're like, man, this alcohol doesn't taste good anymore. I don't like the way I feel when I drink this now. And I don't like the way I feel when I drink a ton of caffeine. So you start to kind of like have this resignation with how you're operating. And now because you're leaving plant medicine with a new frequency, almost like a new rebirth, right? And you're just seeing like you're a newborn baby. And now anything you put into a newborn baby's self, like you just can't really operate with it any longer. So I know there are some facilities I am aware of that have treated addiction with plant medicine, and it works really, really well. And I think it just helps you start to embody the self and start to cherish who you are more because this vessel, this vehicle you're driving is all you have. And so you start to make more investments into that because you realize how sacred it is and how beautiful you are. And so those realizations help kind of transcend the suffering we had before these experiences, right? When you start to develop the capacity to handle plant medicine experiences, and you go further and further into the transformation of who you are. So really profound. I am curious now that you've had this awakening per se, or a version of it, like what is your vision for what you're trying to do for helping others, especially with veterans and so forth?
Yeah. So, I mean, right now I'm in this mode of discovery where I'm learning about all of these different healing modalities. As an example, I just learned about a combo this last weekend, and discovering all of the different entheogenic medicines and pathways and tools that are out there. One thing people don't realize is these medicines aren't new, right? It's new to Western society. But these medicines have been around for hundreds of thousands of years. There's evidence in the Amazon rainforest of there being structured communities, villages, et cetera, that existed literally 150,000 years ago. And a lot of their artwork and the things that they're finding, their patterns, their geometry, it's all shaped around the visions that you see in ayahuasca, as an example. So there's a lot of different, if you look up Graham Hancock and any of his stuff, he's fascinating.
I love Graham Hancock.
He's the best. For anybody listening, go geek out on him. But the reason why I bring that up is because we have lost this ancient history, this ancient medicine that has been around for eons and eons and eons, longer than we can even imagine. And this was the natural medicine. This was the natural healing remedies of ancient tribes. Look at the Native Americans. The Native Americans have their sacrament. Their sacrament is peyote, and they use it, to treat family members, their loved ones, to stay connected to God, like you name it. And this is a very sacred thing. And of course, Western society came along, the Catholic Church came along. Now I'm talking about the formation of the United States as we know it today, and wiped out a lot of those traditions and took away a lot of those practices, right? They, sent a lot of children to the Catholic camps that they had, et cetera. I'm sorry, I'm not super articulate about the topic, but basically they wiped out this beautiful medicine, and they wiped out these traditions and these history lessons. And they replaced it with Western society as we know it today, pharmaceutical companies, et cetera. How do you make a profit? And so my goal right now is to re-educate people that these medicines are sacred. These medicines are healing. These medicines will help you. These medicines will open a doorway to your true self and to help you clear out traumas, things that are not yours or things that you should not hang on to allow you to become the best version of yourself. And there's no groups that need it more than veterans and first responders. And so I'm so proud to have sat with it myself and been offered the healing medicine through places like Illuminating Co. There's also other great groups like Heroic Hearts that are doing some amazing work to offer access to veterans and first responders. But everyone needs this medicine. I mean, civilians need this medicine too. And so right now I'm just on this warpath, if you will, to beat with a big metal pot at the top of a hill. These medicines exist. They are sacred. Legalize them. Allow people to experience them. Implement them into professional clinical settings like the VA, regular doctors, hospitals, et cetera, mental health clinics. Because to your very valid point earlier, even about like addiction, we are plagued right now as a society with addiction, with alcoholism, with even the AA group. I don't know if people know this commonly because the information was removed from the original text, but even the AA was formed from an acid trip.
I know.
Yeah. And so, these medicines, when used correctly in the right set and setting with the right intention, not recreationally. I do not condone these medicines to be used recreationally. These medicines can truly heal you.
Yeah, it's I think it's a remembering of who we are. I think sometimes we forget how powerful we are. And I think that's what the limelight is placed on, is the remembrance of the true core of ourselves, the godlike being of what we can attend to or become. And that's what that's showing us. And we have to take a look at all of the things we do to ourselves in an effort to come to that realization. And because we hold that power, but that empowerment is we hold the key to it, and no one else does. And so essentially, we are all the medicine ourselves. And as a community, we heal. It's a trauma response to be isolated and by yourself.
Yeah.
And so as we heal as a community and we do this together, that's how we do this. We do not do it alone. And so I think it's going to take a great effort to really push the limits to what we can do here, especially for the people who serve our communities and our country, right? They're the ones who need it the most because they're the ones taking that sacrifice of their own peace, of their own traumas that they carry in order to feel like they're whole again until they can show up and continue this work that we do to serve others, right? And like I had mentioned earlier, we just forget to serve ourselves. That's the biggest thing. We just lost sight and how important we are in that self-care practice. And one of the biggest things is through integration, and having a self-care practice every single day becomes your anchor through integration. Moments of silence and stillness. And if you want to label that as meditation, it doesn't have to be. If you have a moment with yourself, you can have now time for those thoughts and memories and experiences that come through in those silent stillness examples. And when you're going through body work with yourself, you're instilling with a yoga practice, a physical fitness practice, those moving your body is so valuable. And being disciplined and devoted to that is so essential to your integration as you're, sticking to something every single day. And I think it takes someone who is just sick of their suffering, who kind of lead themselves into finding plant medicine because they are just tired of it. You know what I mean? And that's what it takes. Usually the people I've found are the ones who are just so desperate and nothing has worked. And that's what it takes. It takes plant medicine to really get them to that point. And the way someone had explained it to me is like plant medicine is like you're going up a staircase and you have a missing step. And these plant medicines are like a railing to help pull yourself up past that step. Mm-hmm. And then now you're able to move forward past that blockage, whatever it may be, right? And a lot of times it's just unconscious, subconscious things you're carrying and you're just unaware of it. And so now you're aware of something. Now you can integrate what it was that was blocking you this entire time. And that's the transformation of what we're kind of speaking of, right? It's just bringing, I think Carl Jung had explained this. It's whatever you bring the unconscious to conscious is how you move forward in life. And I really truly believe that. How are you supposed to move forward if you're unaware of something that's blocking you? Mm-hmm. And that's why these medicines are so powerful, because they can illuminate that for you. I think the Graham Hancock thing is pretty cool. I listened to him talk on a TED Talk, and TED Talk actually took his video down. And he talked this beautiful short lecture on ayahuasca and how he went to go do ayahuasca over in South America. And ayahuasca showed him his addiction to marijuana and showed him a parallel reality to how, if he continued his addiction, how his life would look like in two separate forms. One was how he would look like if he wasn't smoking weed anymore, and one would look like if he was continuing this behavior. And he made a decision. He's like, I'm going to choose this other side because I didn't like what I saw. And he said it was so transformative for him and so powerful that, it's changed his life, and he said it was probably one of the most challenging things he's ever done. So I think you can still YouTube it, but TED Talk took it off. It was pretty interesting why they did that. What the hell, man?
Isn't that funny how the institution will try to censor this information? And I'll tell you just, even about such a great topic to bring up is marijuana. I was of the camp of like legalize marijuana, and I still believe in that for sure. But one of the things I encourage listeners to be considerate of is marijuana still marijuana today in the stores? And the reason why I say that is because if it's not grown naturally, and if it's grown with all of the chemicals, all of the, like the Miracle Grow type of stuff, right? Yeah. You're consuming that, you're breathing that in, and you're breathing in addictive components and compounds they're putting into that material. And so into those plants. And so if you're going to smoke marijuana, if you don't know where it's coming from, you should probably research who's growing it. And the same is true for all plant medicines, even psilocybin mushrooms. When things are growing, this is true. You can research this. I'll do my best to articulate the point here. Houseplant, right? There's been a study done. If you talk negatively to a houseplant, the houseplant will die. If you speak loving to a houseplant, it will thrive, right? And so the intention and the vibes that you're putting into the medicines, that matters. And so it's really important to be mindful when you're consuming things like marijuana, that you know where it's coming from and you know how it was grown, what chemicals are in it, because that can become a very addictive substance. It can be used beautifully, and it can be a beautiful medicine to help a lot of people with pain, anxiety, right? It can help them process a lot of things. It can be used in a very incredible way. But if you misuse it, you use it recreationally to the point, and using sourced marijuana that's from maybe not a mindful place, that's using chemicals, addictive substances that they're putting in the way it's grown, et cetera, it can become a very big downward spiral and do you more harm than it's doing good. So it's just really important to be mindful about where you're sourcing this stuff.
Yeah, I heard they do. They put a lot of pesticides now in a lot of the cannabis that's being grown, and I forgot who I heard that from. I didn't even know. I wasn't even aware that they did that. But I mean, it makes sense, right? It's all about cutting costs through capitalism, right? We want to make sure everything's cheaper and more effective the way we can make more money. And pesticides seems to be the best way. They can just spray that shit on whatever they're growing. And for cannabis, that's what they're doing, right? And to keep whatever the bugs off to ruin their product.
But also, it's like who's got the biggest plant? What color is it? How big can we crystallize it? Right? Because that's the thing. When they go into these shops, it's competition, right? They go into these shops to sell their product, and it's like, oh, mine's the best because look at the color. It's like purple monster, Dragon Ball Z, whatever. Like they come up with these crazy names, and it's like it's not even marijuana anymore. Like I don't know if you smoked marijuana when you were a kid, but I sure did. And I remember like the little Mexi weed or whatever I would get. Like that stuff was amazing, and it was great. You could smoke a joint and you'd have a great time. Now there's no way I could smoke a whole joint. I could have like 2 puffs and I'll be blitzed, and so I don't smoke marijuana anymore myself. That's not something I participate in anymore because I can't find any that's grown ethically and without all the chemicals and without all the competition and fancy labeling and packaging. Like I'm just trying to get to the medicine, not to, this addictive substance.
Yeah, I think one good sourced cannabis product would be Rick Simpson oil. Have you ever heard of that before?
No.
Yeah, so Rick Simpson is a gentleman who created this product, and it's concentrated THC used to treat cancer patients.
Wow.
And it's an oil that's super, super concentrated. And they've found super huge results where they're able to just, shrink the tumors to like 90% when someone's taking Rick Simpson oil. And I know people who've done it, and it helped them tremendously to almost reverse their cancer. And I know there's a lot of other products out there that's helped cancer patients with pain, right? And I know back in the day, you've heard people smoking weed, right? And when they had terminal cancer, like it gets rid of my pain. But Rick Simpson oil is so concentrated where it'll shrink those tumors. There's a documentary, I've talked about this before, called Dosed. I don't know if you've ever heard of that documentary. No. It's a 2-part documentary. One's with addiction and one's with a woman who has terminal cancer. And she's in Canada, and they did this study where they had her take a ton of psilocybin and like a hero dose of psilocybin, I think like 5 grams or so. And she was like in her 50s, and she had never done anything in her life. Super like straight edge woman, like super Protestant Christian, never done anything like that in her life. But she was so fed up with her terminal cancer. She was, on the verge of death. And so she did her first session with psilocybin. I had a beautiful experience. She had said that it was the most spiritual experience that she's ever had, and she went to church her entire life. And outside of that, she combined it with a THC compacted formula, kind of like Rick Simpson oil. And throughout her story, I don't want to give it away, but she ends up going in remission after having terminal cancer. And prior to that, the doctor was like, I'm going to do surgery on her. And he was like, I don't know if I can actually do this surgery because it's near your pelvic floor. And so she was out of options, right? And then this kind of came into her path. And then she started to just heal herself, essentially. And that's what these medicines are kind of in place for. It's for you to do your own healing. No one can really do your own healing for you. You have to come to the realization of like, hey, what is it that I am suppressing? What is it that I have to see? What is it that I am not letting go of? And that's what these medicines show. And on the other side of the other episode, this woman was addicted to opiates and heroin. And so she was going through that episode is just gruesome because you're watching her just go through the side effects of trying to be sober from, just this filth she was putting in her body. And so she ended up working with psilocybin. It was kind of working a little bit. And then her therapist was like, let's try Ibogaine. And Ibogaine took her to that next level. It was like, after Ibogaine, it was like, I'm done with my addiction. And it's a really powerful episode if you ever get a chance to see it. I think you have to, it's on their website, and you have to purchase, it's like a $6 purchase for, I think, each episode. But really powerful documentary. And I think the makers of those documentaries, I think they instill helping like first responders and things like that. But that's the kind of stuff we're kind of talking about, what plant medicine offers. And we keep hearing more and more of these profound experiences, right, with what these plant medicines offer and what they're doing to transform people's lives and to see what actual medicine is, right? It's not like you're taking a pill that it's suppressing a symptom. No, you're going into the root cause of it all.
Mm-hmm. I interviewed Dean Stott. He's a SBS British Army famous soldier. And he shared an example with me. I'd never done plant medicine at the time I had this episode with him on my show, but he came on and I was like, well, tell me what it's like, right? Like, what happens? Like, do you see something, what's the experience like going into plant medicine? And he said, fitness and exercise, going to the gym when you're angry is like taking the lid off of a boiling pot of water and letting out the steam. Going into a ceremony with plant medicine is taking the entire pot of water off of the flame and setting it on the counter, right? And letting it cool all the way down and getting you back to your rest state of just this natural, beautiful water. And so, that's, if that's not an analogy of just hope and healing for someone, I don't know what is, there's such power in these beautiful medicines. And so, I just encourage anybody, the medicine will call you when it's time. If you're listening to this episode and you feel called, there's a lot of great resources out there. Another great 4-series show that you can watch on Netflix is How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollock.
It's a really good one.
He's got a great book too. Yeah. And then you can kind of get it follows on 4 different episodes, a few different medicines, how these medicines heal truly at the core level, where it can help people with addiction. It can help you with trauma. It can help you with anger. It can help you with depression. And it can really just transform you. And your point earlier that I'll just also share is you're not just healing yourself, as you mentioned earlier, you're healing everyone around you when you heal,
for sure.
Because just one small example, I had deep mother wounds that I didn't even realize were so significant to me, that were impacting huge parts of my life. And I had a terrible relationship with my mom. And what I didn't realize is, as I was moving through life, like not paying attention to this, and I had shut my mom out completely and, would tell anyone that wanted to talk about my mom trauma, just how much I hated her and didn't want anything to do with her. What I didn't realize is every time I was doing that, I was exasperating the issue. I was just making it hurting her, hurting my sisters, my siblings, right? Like just making it way worse. And since I've healed that mother wound, I've released my mom of this trauma as well. And I've released my siblings of it, and I don't talk about it negatively anymore. And now it's this beautiful healing moment where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I am my mom and my mom is me. And she just did her best, and she was a young mom, 20-year-old, 23-year-old with kids, like that's tough. That's tough work to be a single mom at that age. And, she just did her best. And here I am, the karma has served me well. I had my son, I have a 15-year-old now. I was 20 when I had my son. And it's like, I know now the struggles of being a mom independently and I'm able to give grace back, but like, I'm just healing. By healing myself, I'm healing my mom. By healing myself, I'm healing my family and everyone else around you. So it's really important to do the work, to lean in and do it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And, I can't stress it enough that you're doing generational work when you're stepping into this deeper inset work with plant medicine, because you're now accessing, sometimes some of the medicines will access your bloodline. And so you're clearing. I know in ayahuasca, they say you're clearing 7 generations above you and below you. And so it's really powerful work when you step into the path of just facing yourself, really, right? And a lot of times we're just afraid to face ourselves and face the truth, and that's what really is, plant medicine is just a mirror, and I think categorization of plant medicines is kind of important to articulate too. So you have like things that are synthetic, right? Man-made, like LSD, MDMA. And then you have things that are naturally grown, like psilocybin. Okay. Then you have the big dogs. These are the master plants. Okay. So when you're stepping into master plants, now you're dealing with some serious work and introspection. And so when I speak of master plants, I'm talking about entheogenic medicines. So there's a significant difference. And entheogens is what it does is it allows you to go into higher planes of consciousness to heal yourself. And so when I speak of these entheogens. It's going to be ayahuasca, iboga. Kambo's been considered one as an entheogenic medicine as well. And so these are the three medicines. To what I have been kind of skewed to say that these are the three most powerful medicines out there. And I think iboga is going to be like that's going to be like the Mount Everest type situation where you reach that medicine and it's called to you. We've had Corey come on, who's an ex-Navy SEAL, and he serves iboga. And just hearing about the experiences from all these different medicines, they're very surrendering experiences to step into. And what I mean by surrender is just the ability to just let go of what doesn't serve you any longer, the release of control in order for those medicines to start working on you. But these master plants, they are no joke, and they are the most powerful plants, these medicines on the planet. And so just be aware of the capacity for a person to step into something like this. You have to be into a state of that devotion of your own self-mastery in order to integrate, in order to even work through the experience, because it is so challenging and so profound that you need to be able to prepare yourself before and after. You need to be able to integrate them. And so I think when Corey was on here, he talks about how it's about 6 months to a year to even integrate iboga because it's that powerful, and ayahuasca takes a long time as well. So these medicines have a tradition with the indigenous cultures that support it as well. So you have to remind yourself that these traditions, these teachings, they're very valuable, and they will help you and guide you along the way with understanding what's actually been taught to you, because it's not like an easy process. It's just like, bam, here's the truth. Deal with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Just something that really resonated as you were talking is the concept of like being ready. So there's prep work, by the way, that goes into these medicines. For those of you listening that haven't sat with medicine before, if you're sitting with someone who's skilled and is, someone that you should sit with, they'll have you prep first. And that could be a couple of weeks to a month long process of getting your diet right. There's a dieta that you have to follow where you're cutting out alcohol, you're cutting out caffeine, you stop having intimacy with your partner for a while, right? Because even energy is a real thing, which you'll find out going through these medicines. So you need to like create some space and like truly prepare your body. Then you sit with the medicine on an empty stomach, right? And then and then after that, you are usually asked to abstain from certain things like alcohol, other medicines or drugs for a period of at least 7 days following, right? To truly integrate these things. And it's interesting because I have a really fast short story that will exemplify or be an example of how important it is to be prepared and to take these medicines seriously. So I went through my ceremony with 10 other women, and in the retreat I went to in Austin, Texas, and it was a week long. And most of us had the same type of issues: PTSD, anxiety, depression, all of that. I was so committed, and this is not me tooting my own horn. It was just me being ready to end my life, where I was like, I will do anything. I'm humbling myself. You're telling me there's a light at the end of this tunnel. I'm going to listen to you. I listened to Justin, who was one of the facilitators. I did everything he told me to do to a T, because he assured me that on the other end of this experience, if I followed the instructions and I took it seriously, I would have true relief. And for me, this was about saving my life. And so I took it super seriously. Well, some of the other women that went through, and I love them all very dearly, it was less of a desperation for them. For some of them, it was like more of a curiosity than like it being life-saving. Right. Yeah. And so we treated the integration, we treated the prep work very differently. But I took it hardcore serious. Some of those women took it very lightly. And so they were drinking the coffee a day before. They hooked up with their husband before. They weren't going to see them for a week the day before. When they came to the retreat, they're like, is it really no caffeine? Right. So they're not like taking it super seriously. And then, right after we came out of the medicine, they're immediately gunning for, well, can I have a glass of wine? Can I have a caffeine, whatever it is. And within days, their anxiety is back because as soon as they're getting home from the retreat, they're going back out with their same old girlfriends. They're doing the same partying. They're consuming the same kind of content. They're putting that murder mystery podcast back on that they love so much, right? They're back into the same habits that they were doing before. And so what's really important about these medicines, if you want to get the maximum effect out of it, take it seriously, really do the deep work. And that might mean cutting off some people out of your life. It might mean changing your habits. It might mean no longer drinking alcohol. It might mean quitting smoking, right? It might be doing things that you think are just so hard for you to do and insurmountable. The truth is, how bad do you want it, right? Like, how bad do you want to change your life? Do you like the way your life is now? then great, keep going. But if you want to change your life, you might want to lean in and do the hard work, because the medicine will show you, it'll put in your face the dark shadows of yourself. It will tell you, you will know. In fact, you probably now, without even going through the medicine, if you actually listen to your body, you probably already know what needs to change. It might be your boyfriend that you need to get rid of, or your girlfriend. It might be that you need to move and you might need to switch a job. You know that you have a drinking problem. You know them already. You're just not willing to face it yet. So how bad do you want it? How bad do things have to get before you'll make a change? And for me, it was being ready to kill myself. That's when I was ready to make a true change. And now I'm here, and I took the medicine seriously, and I'm doing the integration work seriously. And my life has never been better. Like, it's never been better. I feel amazing, and that's because I took it seriously. So just for those of you listening, like, don't let yourself get to the point where I got. Like, take it seriously, don't let it get to you almost having to start making funeral plans before you decide to make a change. Do it now. Make the changes now.
Yeah, you make a good point. And that's why I mentioned the word devotion, right? You are completely 100% devoted to yourself and so disciplined in that way where you're like, no, I'm not going to be around. If I go around my friends that drink, no, I'm not going to be around them anymore because they want me to drink, and I'm going to drink if I'm around them. So you set yourself up to where, are you going to come into those habits again? The same old patterns? If you're around those people, then you need to make some changes. And it came to a point for myself when I was like, just making those decisions on a regular level. I was just tired of being sick. And so I started to make just that inventory of my life and say, no, you know what? I'm not going to do these things because I don't like the way I feel after. And I think we're just so disconnected from our emotional self. And we've come into so much more of like an analytical thinking of logic of how we operate our lives. And that's a limitation in itself, because the emotional body is really more of how we are supposed to operate. That's more an intuitive sense of who we are. It leads into how we're supposed to lead through our heart. And that comes in and kind of segues into what these plant medicines do. The entheogenic medicines I mentioned, Kambo, Iboga, ayahuasca, these are heart-based medicines. These medicines do not speak to your logical mind or the analytical thinking. They speak to your heart, because that's the essence of who you are. And when you're able to open up yourself to that space, that's where the messages come. They don't come to the mind. You're coming into the space of who you truly are, and that's in that heart space, the space that's sitting in the middle of your chest. And that's really where these experiences start to transform your life, when you start to access your life through that space. And I think that's a huge lesson. And the way I've kind of understood it through ancient wisdom cultures, because a lot of my, I would say I started really diving into indigenous teachings and ancient elder teachings a while back now, maybe a few years now. And through Chinese medicine, their ancient wisdom culture, they've already mapped out what consciousness is. And so the way it works is that we have our consciousness, right? And through that consciousness is the truest self, the truest form of who you are. And from there, it's kind of like a ladder or a staircase, the way information travels. And it goes from your consciousness, the truest form, and it comes down in through the nervous system, and it goes in through the heart space. That's the next step. So most of information, it comes down to that area. So most of your experiences in your life, whether it's something you've experienced, something that your heart has felt, and it's been trapped in that space, and you haven't integrated it in your life, these medicines open you up to that area. And that's what's really profound. And so the way that next step goes, it kind of ladders down in past the nervous system again, and goes in through your emotions, through your emotional body, and then goes in through the mental self, and then through the physical form. So anything that's showing up as a symptom coming through its physical form, it's kind of, you're already too late, because it's already showing up in physical matter, right? The consciousness has already integrated itself through, and now you got to kind of go backwards. So once you're working through something, you got to work through those emotions. You got to go back through your regulating your nervous system, how that operates. And then now you got to go through the heart space. That's where most of your information is. And that's why, you're going to go through ayahuasca experiences and iboga. And if you're not understanding it, if you don't understand how it's operating, that's what it's doing. I promise you that's what it's doing. Because if you don't have the capacity to understand how it's operating, how are you supposed to integrate or really understand what's being shown to you, And I think one of the biggest things was, I think Corey had talked about, is like, iboga is about mending the mind-heart connection. And that's the only medicine that does that. And it will actually make you go a little bit crazy with your mental structure of how you're thinking to see what you're doing to yourself to get you to go here. And it's pretty profound. And for me, serving Kambo, I know people who are stuck going through the logic thinking, they will have a really terrible experience, but it's because Kambo's telling you to go here in your heart. And that's just the way it works. And this is the way it's been designed. It's been created in that form. And so, I have, I have a presentation that I'm coming up with that I'm soon to be going to delivering on heart-based consciousness. Because yes, we can do EMDR, we can do this therapy, we can do this stuff, but it's all analytical thinking. We can do that healing here. Yes, we can have this understanding, of how we're operating with our behaviors and so forth. But we're missing another piece here. And it's the way we're navigating our space through our heart. And there's a really profound intricacy with how that operates. And it's been taught for, thousands of years of how, many indigenous teachings have been told, hey, you have to be here. Most masters say it's here. And we want to go into a space of mastery and self-healing. It has to start with, the true core of who we are, which is in our hearts.
Yeah, I cannot champion that enough. I mean, I didn't want to get too sensitive and woo-woo with our conversation initially because I don't want to scare anybody away from talking about these things. Because as soon as you start talking about the balancing of feminine and masculine and going into heart and all of that, a lot of people start because we're still, as a society, we're still so locked in, especially for men, unfortunately, that being sensitive is bad. Feeling your emotions is bad, right? And oh my gosh, yes, I'm so glad you just said all that. As I was going through the medicine, in every single one of my medicine ceremonies that I've done at this point, all of them have told me to soften my heart and to speak from my heart and to lean into my heart and to watch what I say. And I'm going like this because literally the medicine at one point is having me touch my throat and be mindful with your word. And, just giving me these beautiful lessons that I needed to be more mindful of. I had built myself up to be so defensive in my survival mode, in my fight or flight mode, and that's why I was so angry all the time. If you had met me, you'd be like, wow, what a seriously, because I had built up these defenses. This was a defense mechanism to save myself. And I'd become a really hardened version of who I am now and who I really am. And so the medicine consistently always, in fact, I had this one beautiful moment where it's my hands were being guided over my heart. And it was just this beautiful opening up of speak from the heart. What would the heart do? Follow your heart. And so that is truly the resonating message. And as you really start to get into spirituality, plant medicine, entheogens, etc., they all point back at the same thing. And all of it is love, by the way.
Sure.
All of it is love. It's inner love, self-love, love for others, love for the world, love for the planet, right? It's all love. And so I just, you don't need medicine to start that now. You don't need to go sit at a fancy retreat. You don't need to sit with the medicines. You can do that work starting right now. What does your heart say? And right? You know the work that you need to do already. You don't have to ask anybody outside of you. You don't have to seek out gurus or spiritual masters or shamans, or you don't have to do anything. Everything you need to know is in your heart right now. And so, just start tapping in there. You don't need medicine for that.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that's been so hard to articulate that message, but to deliver it in a sense for someone to understand it who doesn't get what that means, right? They think it's just this hippy dippy shit. It's that word's always thrown out there, especially to, combat veterans and also first responders and shit. If I would go to the fire station right now and to tell some of these guys this
with your
shit,
mustache,
come on, man, they wouldn't listen, to be honest. And so even to understand spirituality, and spirituality is not religion.
No, it's
I hate
not.
to break it to you. It's not.
It's not.
So it's been really difficult to manage how I can break that down for you. And I have some good concepts to kind of break things down. Like a good example is, the movie Rudy, that guy. He's a short football player who went to Notre Dame. It's a true story. Have you ever seen that movie?
I don't think so.
Oh, come on. It's an older movie, in the 90s. So the story goes that, Rudy is this shorter guy, and he's always had this dream to play for Notre Dame, right? This really premier just football team. And he had this dream to do it, but he's a tiny guy. And so he just works super hard, first of all, to get the grades to go to that school. And he's broke, he has nothing. And then he tries out for the team and he keeps failing like forward, right? He keeps trying to try out for the team. And then at some point, like he has so much heart that he makes the team and then he plays in the game and his parents get to see him. It's a really beautiful story. So people who have seen that, they understand, oh dude, Rudy, you know? And no, everyone knows when they are in the stands and you're just observing a team play, right? And you see a smaller person on the field or on the court, and they just kill it, you know? And you're like, dude, that kid has some heart, right? You don't say that kid has some mind. Mm-hmm. You just don't. You know, that kid has a spirit within him. And all of us who have gone and become a firefighter or police officer who have gone through the academy, right? You had to find that warrior spirit within you, within your heart of yourself to get where you're at. Mm-hmm. And that's your spirit. That's spirituality. That's who you are. That's the true spirit and essence of who you are. That is true spirituality. So to break it down like that, guys are like, oh yeah, man, that's pretty badass if you were bringing it up like that. Because it's true. Yeah. It has nothing to do with religion. You know, so you have to really harness your warrior spirit within. And that's most of what these medicines are. It's a remembering of what that is.
That's right.
What's inside of you. And it's been dormant this entire time. And so, yeah, you got to siphon through some of the trauma and all that bullshit you set up for yourself and in your life and the experiences you've had to learn from. And so you got to move past that first in order for you to start understanding the lessons and the teachers of what these medicines offer. So it's been super hard to bring that down for people to understand and ingest, right? Like as if you're giving someone a cold glass of water on a hot day, right? You want it to be simple and also practical, and you don't want to go too far out there because they don't want to lose people. And that's been really hard for this community, I think, you know?
Yeah. As I started investigating what the medicines are, what ones I wanted to do and how to do them, what was I going to go through? What was the experience going to be like? I try through my show to shed a little bit of color on that for people. But now I understand why the facilitators were so hesitant with me to describe it for me, because the truth is the experience is going to be so unique, just like a fingerprint. It's going to be unique to you. It's going to give you exactly what you need. It's going to lead you to the water that you need to drink. It's going to help you unpack the bags that you have packed, in the way that you need to have them unpacked. And you'll see things differently from the person right next to you in the same medicine, in the same experience, because it's what your mind needs, what your spirit needs, what your heart needs. But yeah, just one final thing on just being spiritually like a warrior and cool. Like that's exactly like what this tattoo is, by the way. Like, you don't see too many Catholics getting, cool, hardcore tattoos, but like, there's a Tibetan Buddhist giving out tattoos for a reason. It's not religion. Yeah. It's spirituality. It's two very different things, and it just leads you right back to the true nature of who you really are: a divine, incredible, beautiful being.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough. Like we're so powerful, and we've really bastardized ourselves into not being that, and it's fucking sad. I did it to myself for a very long time. And going back to the very beginning of this episode when I talked about me being programmed to be a good soldier, I was just doing things for other people and to gain extra external validation to, be part of the team and be liked within the crew. And it severed me from the truest form of who I was or who I am, and I think that was detrimental in my own field of work. And I always tell younger members on the job, like, hey, man, don't do that to yourself, And it's harder for younger members in their earlier 20s because they are still developing kind of their identity of who they are.
They want to fit in.
And they can get caught up in it. We call it, it's a very common term in our department called if you're drinking the Kool-Aid, right? Because there's very aggressive, alphas that are just trying to be like, hey, man, this is like, if you're not doing this job, like you should, quit or something like that, because it's a very physical, mental, emotionally demanding job. And we are very busy, in our department. We're extremely busy, to be honest. And yes, you have to have some dedication to this art form of firefighting, right? And being a good employee. However, don't get caught up in losing yourself in that aspect. And it happens to a lot of members who now, 10, 15 years down the road, they don't know who they are because it's their identity. And I just want to remind people, like, when we do our work, our physical labor, whatever operation you do, it's a performance. It's not an identity. It's not who you are. And just remember that it's a role that we play in this grand scheme of life. Shakespeare said, it's like all the world is stage and men and women merely players. So remember that this is a stage, and however you can kind of create the play you want as the director. But that's the part you have to remember, is that you are the one creating your reality. Don't forget that. And don't get caught up in the game. Don't get caught up in the drama of life, because once you get sucked into that, I mean, this whole election, man, if you're getting caught up in that and not seeing the bigger picture, you're going to get stuck, right? And then you're going to start identifying with this political party you're affiliated with or whatever, and you're losing sight of the bigger picture, which is what? America is united, right? And we've been dissevered from that part of who we are for a very long time. And that's really where our power comes from. It's as we come together united, and it's been polarized. So I don't want to get too far into that, but, it's just an example. Like, don't get caught up in that bullshit. You know, we don't need to.
One of the most beautiful things about plant medicine that it took me a minute after coming home from plant medicine to realize what had happened was a perspective shift. That instead of being a reactionary, instead of reacting to my life, how it was playing out, I became the observer. And so you can do that now. Also, you don't need plant medicine for that. It starts with even your thoughts, right? If you're someone who has intrusive thoughts where you're like, you just got that negative bird on your shoulder who's always like, that person's looking at you funny, or that person, I can feel the energy. They don't want me in the room. And, the negative energy, I'm sure you're all familiar with. Just be an observer. Hey, brain, what are you thinking over there? If you don't like what's on TV, change the channel. So once I hear that negative bird on my shoulder, I'm like, no, maybe they're just having a bad day. Maybe they woke up on the wrong side of the bed. We don't know. Let's find out, right? Let's just give it some room. Instead of me reacting to that person, like, why are you looking at me funny? I don't need to do that. I can just observe, I can just check them out, say good morning, maybe shift the dialogue, change the channel in not only my head, but in reality. Like, how's your day going? You doing okay today? And just immediately shift it. And so even in like traffic, my trigger, like how I said to myself before going through plant medicine, I'm going to know if this is working based on how I can get from point A to point B in LA traffic. Because I'm telling you, like, for those of you who are not watching, but you're just listening, I'm a small, blonde, petite woman, right? And yet here I was in LA traffic, literally, I'm not kidding, throwing my car in park, getting out of the car and being like, get out of the car, right? Like ready to throw hands with someone. Like, what am I going to do? You know what I mean? And yet that's like how bad my anger had gotten. So for me, becoming the observer, now it's like, if I see someone cutting me off in traffic, I'm like, interesting choice, buddy. I hope that you're going to be okay going up down the road, and I wish you well, right? Like, I'm just the observer. I'm not having to react. The guy never in a million years woke up and was like, there's going to be a blonde girl in traffic today. She's going to be driving a Land Rover Defender, and I'm definitely cutting her off. Like, that never happened, right? And so for me to like realize that and shift the perspective, like, why am I yelling by myself in the car? Nobody can hear me. Nobody cares. And I'm going to be okay, right? Like, so instead of just reacting left and right, whatever it is, right? Getting mad at the grocery store, getting mad on the phone, telling the customer service rep on the phone, like, fuck you, whatever. Just be an observer. Just like slow down. Like, things are going to be crazy in front of you. Sure. You're going to have people cutting you off in traffic and all of that, but like, it's not about me. It's not about me. Just take a deep breath and just observe. Hang on to the things you think are important. Let go of the ones that are clearly not. And I promise you, the only things that are going to be important all come from a place of love. And so just give that back too. I'll just share one more example of coming from a place of love. I have been in my head a lot throughout my life, coming from a place of rejection and, fear of abandonment and things like that, where like if someone doesn't get back to me fast enough in a text message or whatever, then I get offended by it. Right. And I immediately, because of, what do those things lead to? Defensive behavior, putting guards up, putting walls up, right? That's where anger comes from, and, reacting to rejection, et cetera. In the medicine told me to speak from a place of love, and what would love do? And so now in scenarios where someone I feel has maybe done me wrong, like maybe they didn't respond to a text message fast enough or whatever, I always question, well, what would love do? And in a recent case, I had a friend of mine who's very dear to me. They weren't responding to a text message, and I thought it was really weird. Well, old Amy would have been like, yeah, fuck that person. I'm not going to listen to them. I'm not going to talk to them. I'm not even going to bother anymore and blow them off. That's very toxic. Speaking from a place of love, new Amy sent another message. Hey, I'm thinking about you. Hope you're doing okay. Hope all is well. You were on my heart today, and I just wanted to let you know. Lo and behold, a few minutes later, I get a text message back. Oh man, I am not doing good. I'm not doing good. I got a lot going on in my world right now. I'm really depressed. Like they sent me this text message back where, oh my gosh, if I had spoken like the old Amy would have by being reactionary and defensive and not speaking from a place of love, I would have just made that person's day even worse. So I encourage you, there's a saying that goes around, you never know what someone's going through. Always be kind. And I just can't emphasize that enough. When you're speaking from your heart, when you're operating from your heart and doing what love would do, your world is going to just transform so incredibly beautifully. So speak from a place of love. Yeah.
I think, love to end on that. That was really beautiful. Yeah. The perspective change is huge because you realize, how quickly you can shift a paradigm in anyone's life by the way you treat them. And mostly with kindness. One of the biggest things is killing someone with kindness, people who've done you wrong.
Yeah.
And as hard as it is for your ego to do that, you'll see the benefits after you start, practicing it. It seems so stupid and skewed, but it's not, I promise you. It's difficult. Trust me. I mean, being at work and when I get out of my own head and start shifting the way I behave, it makes more of an impact. An impact drives income in your life. More abundance comes through. So really powerful stuff. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we're going to close up here because we're doing like a 2-part episode where we're recording for Amy's podcast. She has a podcast platform as well. So we're kind of doing like a big day here and we're going to close up. But I did want to ask you, if someone wants to listen to your podcast or whatever, how do they connect with you? And then if they're curious about information about plant medicine and so forth, I know you were really huge on expressing the education and stuff on that and so forth. How do they connect with you?
Yeah, so you can find me QN as in Nancy, AMY for QNAMY, and you can just type in QNAMY in Google. I'll come up everywhere. Google, YouTube, Instagram, etc. Send me a DM if you want to reach out and say hi. I'm always happy to talk about plant medicine, spirituality. And then to learn about plant medicine, there's a lot of really incredible organizations.
Yeah.
If you're a military veteran or first responder, one would of course be Illuminating Co. If you just type in the Illuminating Co. Austin, Texas, they have a ton of beautiful resources. Heroic Hearts is another one that's a nonprofit. These are both nonprofits, by the way, that have done a lot of research. But I would also encourage you to check out Michael Pollock. He's got some incredible resources. And there's also a ton of work being done research-wise. MAPS, M-A-P-S,
MAPS is great.
Is a great organization that's trusted. They work with some of the best doctors in the world on these medicines to research them and to fund other research studies now into the various components of them. So that's another great place I would go for education.
Yeah, I was endorsing Treat California. You don't know if you've ever heard of them, but that was last year around this time. They were going to put it on the voting ballot for the state to treat first responders and veterans with these medicines, but then it got shut down. But there has been the Siren Project that's come on our podcast and has talked about their nonprofit organization to get first responders, particularly firefighters, to go do these medicines. Nonprofit as well, and then No Fallen Heroes is a really good one too. That I followed them for a very long time. Really profound stuff, but I'm seeing a huge shift right now. Very powerful stuff.
We got RFK in the office too. RFK, he's
big on
hopefully
this too.
Open some doorways. Yeah.
Cool. I'm super excited. So thank you for this episode, Amy, and it was a great episode. Really appreciate you. Everyone, take care. I love you.
It's time for Grablives.